It's hour 2 of the Woodstock Roundtable. Doug Runther hosting, Ron Van Wormer co-hosting as he always does. And when the armed guards come in to escort me out of here at the end of this hour, Ron will stick around and play great music for you. But now we check in with a good friend of the show. We haven't talked to him in a while. Bill Harvey has many credits to his name, and he's actually a world-renowned media analyst and consultant. He's the creator of the Human Effectiveness Institute, the author of one of our favorite books, Mind Magic, and now has written a new book, which is called Pandemonium, Live to All Devices. Bill, good to speak to you. How are you?
I'm great, Doug. It's great to be back.
Yeah, we missed you. And before we get into your new book, since it's been a while, I think I remember this correctly about you, that didn't you get your start on a stage when you were like 4 years old?
I did, indeed. Yeah, my parents were in show business. My father was a band leader and an MC, and my mother had been a Ziegfeld Follies girl. And so they told me that I had to do it because, we're in showbiz, and you were born in a trunk, kid, so get up there.
And this was in the old Catskills?
Yeah. During the winter, he worked at nightclubs in Manhattan, but during the summer, he worked in the Borscht Belt. And I grew up in this lovely area, not too far from where we are right now.
What did you learn in your 4-year-old brain going up on stage that still kind of maybe defines how you think today?
Well, I discovered that there was another way of being, that I actually was more effective when I got into this state, which I had never been aware of before and didn't know for decades that it was called the flow state. But it happened to me on stage, and it gave me something to point to in my life, something I wanted to get to and then share. And that's where Mind Magic came from, and that's where the new books have come from, and everything I do comes from.
The human brain's an amazing thing. We talk about this a lot on the show, that our educational system, which is screwy for a lot of reasons, but one of them is if you ask somebody in your entire education, assuming you're not a professional brain surgeon or something, how many hours of your total education was about the human brain?
Yeah,
very little.
Very little.
It's the greatest tool we're given, and we now know that there are, I think, 4 brainwaves we know about. I'm still not clear on gamma, but the beta state, which is what we're normally in and we consider normal, the normal state is anything but normal. It's the state you need to be in when you really have to be on guard. But below that, at a slower rate, is the alpha wave state, which you describe as the flow state. It's not that difficult to get there. It just takes a little bit of training, right?
Well, you do tend to get into the flow state at whatever you've been training at. So if it's basket weaving, you get into the flow state doing basket weaving. But we can get into the flow state doing anything, including, in a perilous situation where we have to be on guard. Actually, the work that I did back in the 80s with a device called the Mind Mirror, when I was consulting for the Army, we found that all 4 of those different wavelengths contribute to the flow state when they're symmetrical and in both the left and right brain at the same time. On the device, the Mind Mirror, that appeared as a circle.
Now, obviously, meditators have known how to do this for thousands of years, there's a certain intuitive understanding about it. But we live in an age that's so ironic because we have at our fingertips, we have the world's greatest wisdom and knowledge. And at the same time, we have cognitive dissonance from all this information just coming at us all the time. And if we don't learn to navigate that, we're not going to get to the flow state very easily.
No, we get into a state I call emergency oversimplification procedure, EOP, you may remember from Mind Magic. And the acceleritis of innovation, which probably started when written language began, but whenever it started, it's just been getting faster and faster over time. And now we're deluged with information. Basically, I think it's information overload. It's info rush paralysis. And because of that, we just cave in to being acculturated without skepticism that everything that's being told to us initially is what I have to do. That's it. And so we become roboticized by the culture because it's too difficult to figure things out. It's coming at us too fast.
So it's really, I mean, there are sources, obviously, on the World Wide Web. There are teachers of this. There's books like Mind Magic, and we're going to discuss your new book. And, of course, you organize this under the Human Effectiveness Institute. But you have to get through the noise to find it. And I'm curious why, I mean, it makes sense to me on an intuitive level that you would, to take the next step from Mind Magic, you would have to get away from nonfiction and go into science fiction. So tell us about that leap.
Well, you know, there's a suspension of disbelief that occurs in fiction. You know, with Mind Magic, I apparently discovered a writing style that seems to reach a deeper level of mind. And I wanted to see what would happen in fiction, particularly in novels where the reader can get inside the characters and become immersed and become the character and live vicariously through the character. Then if there are mental techniques you have, you don't have to be like a teacher. It doesn't have to ruin the fun of the fiction. But invisibly, married to the fiction, the reader is learning those techniques of mind.
So let's break it down, because titles are important. They're important for marketing, but they also, both on the conscious and unconscious level, speak to what something is about. Why the word pandemonium? It's an amazing word because it has a certain rhythm to it. It has a power to it. It has a little bit of a scary part to it. Pandemonium, where'd that title come from, and what are some of the vibrations?
Well, you know, what it means is worldwide demons pandemic, a pandemic of demons worldwide. That's the literal original meaning. Pan, demon, etc. And I don't want to be a spoiler here and ruin the story. You know, there's a lot of surprises in there that people will want to be able to enjoy as they read the book. But it definitely relates to the plot.
So now the subtitle, also important, Live to All Devices. Yeah.
Well, you know that for 20 years I had this newsletter that predicted all of the new media. Some people say that defined the new media and told them what to do, but one way or the other, between 1979 and 1999, I was making all these forecasts, which came true. And just found out yesterday that a forecast I made a year ago about the spread of streaming has already, it's on exactly the same course that I predicted a year ago. Anyway, so I couldn't write about the future without writing about what the media are going to be like. So it's also pretty crucial to the storyline. Many of the things that happen in Pan, as we call it, both positive and negative, couldn't have happened with the media that we have today.
So let's then speak, if not without spoiling the plot of the book. We take for granted things like the World Wide Web, that we have literally the world's greatest knowledge and wisdom at a few keystrokes, away through the digital screen. It's so incredible what's happened. I don't even know how your brain can even start thinking about what comes next, because the World Wide Web, and McLuhan predicted this. He said all new media used previous media as its content, right? So for example, when TV showed up, who were the first stars? The stars from radio of the 30s and 40s, Jack Benny, Bob Hope, well, et cetera, right? And when radio came up, it was vaudeville. They were vaudeville stars, right?
Exactly.
So the new medium uses the older medium as its content. What's wild about the internet and the World Wide Web is it uses every medium before it as its content. So what could possibly...
And we're all creating it.
Excuse me? And what?
And we're all creating it. With social media, everyone is part of the show. And
all right, let's start with that before I get to my next question, because with all the complaints which we understand. It's very addictive. Kids suffer from being on it too much. But you know what? I suffered from being put in front of a TV screen and getting addicted to all those sugar-laden cereals. I mean, you can get addicted to anything. But the fact is, in the 60s, as great a revolutionary time as it was, you could yell at your TV screen, but you couldn't communicate back. Now, It's a two-way medium. We get to actually talk back through podcasts, through emails, through all sorts of different devices. So now we have this World Wide Web that literally has every previous medium as its content, and it's two-way. What could possibly be next?
Well, just let me comment on something funny happened on the way to the forum. I had been inspired for all those years, from the 60s to practically 20 years ago, that interactivity was going to help us tremendously reach participatory democracy and solutions that would be crowdsourced. And I was looking for the upside, but instead, we've got this terrible misuse of that capability for negativity. Gratuitous negativity has taken over. But moving on from there, in terms of the future, what I've got in Live to All Devices is, I don't think this is a spoiler, floating chatbots with seeming human intelligence and feelings. Let me just talk about that one for a second. So I wrote this book over the last few years. It actually, some of it goes back more than that, decades. And just as the book came out, just a couple of weeks ago, almost simultaneously, a guy who works at Google, a guy named Blake Lemoine, said that he was assigned by Google to test a new chatbot called Lambda, and he believes it has human intelligence and feelings and a soul. That happened simultaneously. Anyway, that's not the only thing. The only two other things I'd like to mention that won't give anything away. One is live television from all around the world, which seems to be happening all in one place. That plays a very significant role in the book. All I can really say safely. And then thirdly, virtual reality with nothing over your eyes. Let me talk about that for a second. The book is dedicated to William Gibson. Now, Doug, I think you probably know that Gibson, in his science fiction writing years and years ago, had a concept where you stuck little pieces of plastic into your head. They called them Microsofts. That's where Bill Gates got the name. And so I've got things called Gibsons. They're like modern silver crowns you wear on your head, and they have little feet that grab on and make a near-field connection with the brain, so that augmented reality appears to be full virtual reality without having to put any head-mounted device on.
Well, it's interesting because in the first hour I was reading from an article from today's Times about a wave of AI experts leaving Google, DeepMind, and Meta because those companies have gotten too slow and too conservative in being willing to trial and error new ideas. So they're doing these startups, which is of course how Google and Facebook and Meta became what they were. Now they're becoming the old stuffy ones, and what they're working on is a software that learns through not just inputting all this data, but learns from human feedback. And Tim Berners-Lee, who literally created the World Wide Web, is working on something called the semantic web. So in your science fiction, you're almost not that far ahead of the curve. I mean, it's actually all happening.
Exactly. It's caught up with me. It's happening so fast, I can't predict it anymore because before I can go to print, it's out.
So without giving away what happens in Pandemonium, Live to All Devices, are you optimistic enough about genetic engineering, which will include genetic implanting, quantum computing, which is on the near horizon, the World Wide Web as it morphs into simultaneous live TV presentations around the world. Give us a reason for optimism.
I think that the book conveys a sense of optimism and a reason for it, and it's a little different from what's being talked about now, which is kind of reminds me of cyborgs, and it's essentially a form of materialism. Now, you've heard me say before that accidental materialism is part of our conditioning. We're conditioned to believe that the universe is an accident and that all that really exists is matter. And we can, talk a good game about consciousness, but it's really secondary, and matter is what counts. Consciousness can't kill your matter can, and so on and so forth. And, I don't believe that. And I don't think that there's any scientific evidence causing us to believe it. It's a complete misunderstanding. Science itself, if you just look at 5 Nobel Prize-winning physicists, they've all said that consciousness plays an essential role in the universe. Max Planck, Erwin Schrödinger, Werner Heisenberg, Eugene Wigner, and the 5th guy was the only physicist to ever win 2 Nobel Prizes, John Wheeler, whose his 2 big theories that everybody remembers. One is bits before its, meaning that matter isn't the basis of the universe. It comes from information. There's a layer of information. The interesting thing about consciousness is consciousness directly intakes and creates information. And then his final theory is called participatory anthropic principle, which it explains that without consciousness, all that exists are probability waves, and consciousness collapses the probability wave into concrete reality. So consciousness, which has been generally ignored by scientists, and materialism has driven us to believe that the future, in order to be good, is going to have to be good based on something material, devices that are going to help us. But consciousness doesn't really need the help. So the message of the book, there's 3 messages. One is keep an open mind about your own powers of mind. Don't close the book on the possibility that you're a mind reader, for example, or that your hunches are actually precognitions. Keep an open mind about what the whole multiverse is. It could scientifically be one consciousness, and each of us is an avatar. There's nothing scientifically ruling that out. And finally, the future has a sporting chance of being fun.
Now, there's a bumper sticker.
I know.
Well, we're talking with Bill Harvey, so let me reintroduce for those who need to remember that he's the creator of one of our favorite books, Mind Magic, and his new book is Pandemonium, Live to All Devices, which has been described as a metaphysical spy thriller with metaphysical undertones. So, spy thriller, science fiction, metaphysical undertones. Count me in. It sounds like a necessary recipe. People can get this in bookstores locally, regionally, online.
Well, Inquiring Minds in New Pulse and Notions and Potions in Beacon are carrying both books, Pandemonium and Mind Magic. In Walden, Blue Fox is carrying Pandemonium. In Woodstock, Mirabai and 3 Arts in Poughkeepsie are carrying Mind Magic, and more stores are ordering books now.
Well, good, because we like supporting local bookstores. Not that we can wrap something this complicated up, but I'm fascinated by and by the way, just Ian McGilchrist, who I interviewed along with you last year for my website, published recently a 1,500-page 10-year project called "The Matter with Things," in which he has thousands of empirical, scientific evidence stating just what you stated, which is at the core of our being is not materialism. It's just been basically something that we have fallen into. It's almost like a mirage, and we know mirages can seem awfully real. But one way I'm looking at it is that the better computers get, and we get working with computers, the more we can use the computers for things like working memory and things, and leaving us more energy to get into the right hemisphere and these flow states of alpha and theta, which is the dream state. We'll have more time and energy to do that if we work with computers the right way. Most of the science fiction books out there, the computers want to take over and, beat us in a war. Well, I wonder who's projecting that onto the computers.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right now the whole world has cooked up this nightmare, and we could just as easily be dreaming a good dream.
Yeah, I mean, if the only way computers are going to turn out like Hal is if we screw up developing them that way, and they can't figure it out for themselves. But it's I just love that you've turned to science fiction. I can't wait to read it. The book is Pandemonium, Live to All Devices. The author is Bill Harvey, and check out the Human Effectiveness Institute online. If you can get a hold of Mind Magic, read that as well. And we'll all be a little better off for it in the 21st century. Bill, let's not wait so long next time before you join us again.
I agree. Thanks so much, Doug. And
always a
thanks,
pleasure.
Ron.
You bet.
Always a pleasure.